Our next guest this morning, our town administrator, Chris Clark, and the town of Harwich wastewater guru, Larry Ballantyne. Larry has been in on this project since day one, practically, haven't you? So,
I don't want to show my age. So I don't know back that long.
so if you, and those are Articles 14, 15, and 16 for wastewater. So start when ready, Larry.
Thank you. My intent is to give a brief overview. This has been going on for a long time, and it's always good to remember why we're involved with this, wastewater issues. And then Chris has been the guru on the details of the articles. I'm going to turn it over and let him do the heavy lifting. But just as a reminder, why we started on this is because we started a water monitoring committee probably 2003. We've been monitoring our water embayments and ponds since that time, and our embayments are impaired. We know that through water monitoring data, biological monitoring, and using that data, we see that our ponds need to have their nitrogen reduced 60 to 100%. And since that started, the Conservation Law Foundation has sued Cape Cod, the towns, to take care of those issues. That lawsuit was judged a couple years ago, and there's some misinformation that it was settled. That's not true. It was stayed, which is a critical issue because Conservation Law Foundation could bring that lawsuit back at any time. And in fact, since that action, they've gotten increasingly aggressive in saying we have to move ahead and take care of our impaired embayments. Quite frankly, in the past, they've stated publicly, I'm not laying any secrets out, that they have little trust in the towns taking care of their obligations to do that. And that, of course, would, if they were to take action on that, they could throw us into more of a Boston Bay situation, which instead of a 40-year plan could force us into doing this rapidly, much more expensive. There's a lot of talk on cost. The Cape Cod Commission, when they first started this discussion, estimated it would cost Cape Cod $6 to $8 billion to take care of this problem. Now that estimate was based on sewering all of Cape Cod. Through funding from the state, our local funding, using UMass Dartmouth, we've used modeling results to decrease that cost by using, not sewering all the towns. And in fact, in Harwich, we're going to end up sewering about half the town, not 100% of the town, to meet our obligations of reducing nitrogen into the embayments. We're also, well, let me just, I don't want to carry this on forever. In Harwich then, to do the 8 phases to clean all our embayments is about, will cost us about $240 million. Dan's shaking his head, that's such a big number. But that's 8 phases. We're now concentrating on this town meeting on dealing with phase 2, which is now the article is for $24,775,000. That's an increase of our estimate in our capital outlay plan, which is a little more than $22 million. But that estimate is 6 years old. That was in the capital outlay plan. And so the increase is actually, I know no one likes the increase, but that's based on better costing information. And for those of us that always worry about what it's going to cost in the future, that has built into an escalation estimate, which means that in 2020, when we hope to start the construction and go off for IFP, that cost should be accurate. I will state that the property tax increase on that then, if we take the average house in Harwich of $350,000, would be about $150 per year. I was discussing with Chris this morning, our flyer gives an estimate of those people connected to the sewer of operating costs based on water usage would be about 510. That's for 70,000 gallons. I checked my own water use this past year, and we're using less than 40,000. So our actual operating costs for my home, and I'm in phase 2, so I have a vested interest in all this, would be a little more than $350 per year, which helps out. The connection costs are still being worked on, but they'd be a range of $500 to $1,500. And just to emphasize that from the Cape Cod as a whole to all of our towns, our effort has been to take care of the problem at the minimal cost. We're always looking at, that's why we're regionalizing with Chatham. That's why we're talking about regionalizing with, or partnering with Yarmouth and Dennis. And that's why one of the reasons we widened the bridge at Muddy Creek. That potentially will save us a little under $6 million in reduced number of homes we have to sewer. And that's why we are in discussions with Conservation Law Foundation to take advantage of improving Cold Brook, both for environmental effects and also reduce the number of houses sewered, which again would potentially save us about $6 million in the number of houses we sewer. And so that's been our twofold effort, is to take care of the problem, to meet our legal obligations, and do it the most cost-effective way as possible. And I guess I'll just go ahead, because Peg has asked me a question before, and I just want to respond to, and that is, why East Harwich, why Pleasant Bay Watershed versus Harwich Port? Because that gets a little confusing, but the answer actually is surprisingly simple, or the answers are surprisingly simple. And I'll just list them and not in any order, but one is that our obligation of the CLF lawsuit and to ourselves was to improve our embayments, to reduce nitrogen to a level that will take care of the algae and seaweed we have in our embayments. Harwichport doesn't, the watershed doesn't empty into an embayment. And so even though that would be it'd be good to do for economic growth, because you could have better restaurant, paper plate, or plates rather than paper plates, all that. It doesn't help us move forward on improving our embayments. The other point is that we now have have an agreement with Chatham to use their sewer plant. We went to East Harwich first because that was a least expensive #1 step to do. With much less expensive to build a sewer plant than it was to tie into Chatham. Also, we don't have, well, that's enough said out loud, that's expensive. But part of that agreement is that they will only they will only help us out if it was to help protect Pleasant Bay, which we share with Chatham. So if we go outside of the Pleasant Bay watershed, we can no longer take advantage of the cost-effective solution of using Chatham. So again, it greatly helps decrease cost. The other thing is that the last point I'll make is the data we show says that we should remove about 60% of the nitrogen going into Pleasant Bay. The worst case is Saugatucket Harbor, Wishmere actually, which we're required to move 100%. Now you can quibble which is in worse shape, but they all have to be done. And just on a legal, political aspect, the fact that we're moving ahead on Muddy Creek and the fact that we're moving ahead on East Harwich gives us a lot of credibility with the Conservation Law Foundation, with EPA, and with DEP, that we're serious people. We're taking care of our problems. Give us some time, because we're asking for 40 years, and that may be extended because that's based on a 5-year phase, and based on monitoring data, based on our capital outlay plan, we may want to change that to make it as cost-effective as possible. So that's I just wanted to bring that back, kind of why we're doing it, and then I'll put the hard work to Chris.
And I would like to mention, every once in a while, you'll see hear a little flare up. Well, let them go ahead and sue us. Believe me, people, they will. Uh, So far, the courts seem to have come down on the side.
But let me comment on that, because we're working now with our other Pleasant Bay towns, Brewster, Orleans, and Chatham, on a pilot program on how to enforce that we do what we say we're going to do. If you have a single pipe going in, a plant, dumping compound chemical X into the pond, the EPA enforces that with a watershed or with a discharge permit. We're moving to a watershed discharge permit, and they're looking at what they could do if we don't fulfill our commitments. And there's financial implications. They could charge us, they could withhold money for us. The scariest part to me is they could come back and say, okay, you can't do it as a community. We're going back to each homeowner and say, you have to do it yourself. And that would mean that each of us have to go back and put in our own nitrogen reduction system, which bad grammar, ain't cheap. So we really need to move forward to save that cost. I know Chris will get into it too, but we also are talking about how we can get the best loan rate using the state revolving fund. And that means we have to move forward, meet all these obligations, which will make us likely, we have a very optimistic view we could reduce our interest rates from 0 to 2%, which I think, Chris, you did this, and Peter Hughes on our wastewater could save us during the life of this first phase, somewhere around $4 or $5 million. So it's serious money we could save by moving ahead.
Okay, thank you for your part of it, and take it away, Chris.
Thank you. Maybe just to get into, I want to focus on the mechanics, but just Larry and I have been doing this a couple times now, and just to comment, I do think that, the MWRA, Boston Harbor was given only 10 years to clean it up. So they had a very short timeline. Here we do have, through administrative comprehensive wastewater management plan, 40 years, which allows us to carry that over the debt over 70 years when you borrow for 30-year increments. So I think having that. The other piece is that, in my mind, one of the key important parts of doing Pleasant Bay is the vast majority of our wells are located in that area, drinking water wells. And we have had some very slight, at this point, hits about nitrogen, but why let that get out of hand? So I think that there are a few key components to that. In terms of the mechanics, I am kind of, I guess, a systematic guy. We have a comprehensive wastewater management plan that's been approved. It has 8 phases. Phase 1, with the work being done on Hinckley's Pond, will be complete. Phase 2, last year at town meeting, phase 2 in total, the revised new total is $36,530,000, and the taxpayers last year at town meeting and then subsequently at the ballot approved just shy of $7 million for our purchase into the wastewater treatment plant in Chatham. So that's something that we've already made a commitment and have already started to make payments. The design of the Pleasant Bay South sewer system is $2 million. That's well underway. And then $250,000 for the design of the Chatham interconnect system. And then $2 million for the design, construction, and implementation of Coal Brook, our partnership with Harwich Conservation Trust folks, to see if we can have natural remediation. So we've already, the taxpayers have already made a fairly significant investment into this phase 2 project. To finish phase 2 and to kind of have this be implemented, there's 3 articles that we're looking at specifically relative to that. Article 14, which is the big one, is $24,775,000. Larry already commented about 6 years. We have updated those numbers. In terms of the estimates, I am much more confident today that some of the estimated numbers that have been out have been used in other communities and have been on target. So this is not, hopefully will not be a Saquatucket landside where we were in direct competition with the private sector on building houses and garages. This is fairly unique work, and there are limited contractors that do it. But Orleans and Fall River are the 2 that the most recently have gone out to bid, and those bid numbers came back in. Article 15 is the combination of starting a relationship to establish a Clean Waters Community Partnership between Dennis, Harwich, and Yarmouth. The three towns coming together. We would theoretically build the plant in the town of Dennis. The value for us to having a plant in the town of Dennis as opposed to in Harwich was originally contemplated is about 19% savings. So on the cost of the plant, we would save almost 20% by joining up with these two other towns to construct a plant. And then a similar amount gets saved on annual operating costs. So this is really just a place where we're going to treat the material that we send there, and then it gets put back into the environment after it's been cleaned. So what this does is it allows for the three towns to continue the discussions that we have. Larry and I go to those meetings once a month on Friday mornings to begin that, and I think it's been a good process. But I think that the approach, what this will do is we will work over the next year, and that we did obtain a grant through that was requested through the town of Yarmouth, and we've received $150,000 in which to have the engineering firm help us to design out this agreement. But this agreement would be worked on over the next year, brought back to town meeting for next year, and if we can all reach agreement on how is best to operate, then we would have a partnership solution that we can use in the western part of town, central and western part of town. So that's what is behind Article 15. Article 16, the Sewer Enterprise Fund. One of the things we found in the experience in the town of Chatham is that they don't have enough users to be able to support a full infrastructure. So they have the users will pay a portion, and then they subsidize it with taxpayer money. So our subsidy would probably be in the neighborhood, once we connect the pipes up, if everything goes according to plan, it would probably be in the neighborhood of about $270,000. And that's an awful lot of money to take one time, one year, to build and create that sewer fund. So what we're doing here is over the next 3 years, we'll add about $70,000 a year into that fund to build that up, so when we do have to subsidize, we have the ability to do that. So we've taken that edge off. So Article 16 accomplishes that with the initial appropriation into a sewer enterprise fund of $70,000.
Great. And you have handouts.
Yeah, actually, that was a key thing I wanted to get to, too. So we do have 3 handouts, and we will have them available. One of the ones that I have here is basically a 4-page. It does talk about, in total, there's 6 articles that are related to Phase 2, so 14, 15, 16, which we just talked about, 37, 55, and 61. This does get into the mechanics of how people are going to connect, what each of the articles means, and then as Larry had pointed out, and I think this is really kind of a critical component, if DEP comes out and says you have to do more, your Title V system only takes out 20%, and innovative system takes out 40%. Our target number at the lowest level is 58%, and really in Pleasant Bay, the focus one is 65%. So you could do that, the homeowner could do that, and we still would have to build a system to get to that 65% reduction. And then one of the key components that has been a long time in waiting is we do have a map and we have a listing of who's in and who's out, which has obviously a significance to folks. So I would encourage people to go online and take a look at that literature.
They can check by their street number, street.
Yes, we have
Is
a
that-
street list
yeah.
as well as a map. As
Yeah.
I found after we went to one of these presentations, not everyone likes reading maps. So the street list actually works out pretty well too. On the what to do and how to do it, we have laid that out as well on what will protecting our water resources cost. So it has a simple step-by-step process for people to look at. And then we also have, as the last handout, kind of the DHY, the Dennis Harwich Yarmouth Community Partnership, on what that means. So there's 3 documents. We do also have, we have updated the 12-page material that was put out last year. So if you want to get a full sense for what the 40-year, 8-phase cycle entails, we have that literature as well.
And those are available here, the community center, library, does the library have?
We will drop them off at the library.
Yeah.
And online, obviously. Online. Trying to figure out what that
Getting
hand
prompted by
signal
the
was.
audience, I love it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because I wanted to emphasize they are online. We have a wastewater support committee that their address is online to contact with any questions. Chris has been fielding questions. Michael McCaskill, the chairman, has been fielding questions when they come up, so I'll throw him on. Dan Pelletier has offered to help answer questions as well. I'm available to answer any, if anyone wants to contact me. So we're trying to have as many avenues getting information out as possible. So we look forward to any discussions all these people do.
Great.
All right, thank you all.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
very much, thank you.